Welcome back, everyone, to my channel. Today, we're going to be talking about a budget yellow Palpatine deck. As you can see in the main deck, there are only commons and uncommons, which means there are no rares or legendaries. If you take a look at the sideboard in the bottom left, you'll see a few cards that are rare or legendary that as you fill out your collection, you can consider adding to your deck. And towards the end of the video, I will talk about where these cards could come in and replacements. So without further ado, let's get into the deck. First, we're going to talk about what the deck wants to do. So we want to be ramping, which means gaining resources a little bit faster than normal in order to get to our leader. Uh, Palpatine doesn't come out till 8 resources, which is very late into the game, the latest out of any leader. So we need to run 3 resupply and 3 super laser tech in order to try to see Palpatine as fast as possible. We also have some late game boys, a 3 Reinforcement Walker, and 2 97th Legion that we can also deploy later in the game to help us completely dominate our opponent with unlimited power. So that's the basic idea of the deck. It has a lot of survivability tools, but let's just get into what we're trying to do in the beginning of the game first. So on turn 1, we really need to make sure we're playing something. Ideally, we are playing Crafty Smuggler, the Colonel, or Greedo. Greedo's really cool in this deck as while it is risky to look for an event, there are 15 events in this deck, which is about a third of the deck. But his effect allowing you to discard the top card of your deck, and if it's not a unit, you can deal 2 damage to a ground unit. So if you use it in conjunction with Palpatine's effect, you could be dealing 3 damage to something and drawing a card, which could happen maybe after you poke them in the face for 3, right? So some really cool upside. Also, if they have a dude that has 1 life and a dude that has 2, you could be killing 2 dudes with that effect. So Greedo offers a lot of utility that can be used throughout the game, but it is one of our better turn 1 plays. I'd also say Crafty Smuggler is an ideal turn 1 play since it's a shielded unit. It is able to kill anything. While it might take 2 turns, it will eventually trade and kill with it. I say the third best card we want to play turn 1 is the Colonel. It has a nice effect of allowing us to heal, but if we're playing it going first on turn 1, it's not going to be healing while we play it. Same with Cartel Spacer. It exhausts something, but if we're playing it turn 1, it's not going to offer that utility. So these 2 cards have good stats. They're both 2/3, which are, I would say, good stats on turn 1 of the game. So you can play them turn 1, but they offer a lot more utility when played later in the game. So do keep that in mind. On turn 2, we're looking to be ramping or playing a unit. So let's say you're in the situation where you can either play a Star Viper or a resupply. In my humble onion, I would probably play the Star Viper. Playing resupply will make us go to 5 resources on the next turn. But, if we started out with a Greedo or something, we're probably not going to have a board. So unless we're going into Bosk on the following turn, and we really think the Bosk is going to help us do something really good, ramping on 3 resources doesn't actually matter too much. You can delay resupply. Same with the super laser tech. Our leader costs 8, so we're going to need the ramp. It doesn't necessarily need to happen on turn 3. So keep that in mind. Sometimes establishing a body, especially annoying ones like a 3/4 body, is very hard to kill. And Consortium Star Viper being a 3/3 with Restore 2, that can just be a lot of healing and very annoying for our opponent to deal with, especially when they're an aggro deck. The Star Viper can knock out A-Wings if it gets to attack it first while healing us. Same with the 7th Fleet Defender. It can knock out A-Wings or almost any space unit with 3 defense and stick around to tell the tale. So we have actually pretty strong 3 resource cards. We also have the option of playing Waylay. While Outmaneuver does cost 3, you should almost never be casting this card at 3 resources, as it's only going to be tapping one thing most of the time, and that's just not enough. Now, Waylay is a really strong card to play on turn 2 or with 3 resources, especially after your opponent uses some sort of upgrade or buff effect on their unit, such as Wing Leader, giving +2/+2 to a unit, and then you just waylay it the unit they chose back to their hand, and they're super sad. And you're probably going to win that game because that's a very, very strong swing and tempo in your favor, as they summoned a very below average unit because it's just a 2/1 now in their turn 1 play, and all of that damage is taken away, right? Waylay could just heal you 5 while putting a card your opponent doesn't really want to play back onto the field into their hand. Sorry. So do keep that in mind. We don't always want to resupply or super laser tech uh, just because they're in our hand on 3 resources. But we do obviously want to play them, and we probably want to be playing 2 of them within a game. That way, when our opponent's at 6 resources, we'll be at 8 and can summon our friend Emperor Palpatine. So if you look at the deck too, there aren't many turn 4 plays. So this is where we could use our 3 mana play of Resupply or Super Laser Tech. On 4 resources, you could play Super Laser Tech and use Palpatine's ability to deal a damage and draw a card. And then maybe that 5th resource that you'd be getting off Super Laser Tech lets you play Greedo. You know, you could do some cool plays like that. And maybe just 1 damage is all you needed to either like pop off a shield or put the finishing touches on a unit. But in all honesty, you're not going to be using Palpatine's effect too often in the game. We're really playing him so when he flips over, we can steal some units, right? Or maybe we're playing it the same turn we're flipping him over, so we can deal 1 damage to, let's say, an Avenger, and then flip Palpatine over and take the Avenger for our own, right? We may not have legendaries in our deck, but they have some in their deck, and they will be ours. We're playing 2 copies of Escort Skiff, which is a really good follow-up after you play one of these green units up above, Homestead Militia or Consortium Star Viper. Because it has Ambush, it's going to come in and kill something, which usually lets it 2 for 1 in some way. We are a more control-y deck, so it is nice to be able to control the field with it early, but we're not playing that many green units, as half the deck is yellow. That's why we're only playing 2 copies of this card, as sometimes it's just a 4/4 with no stats. At 5 resources, we have only 2 cards, Overwhelming Barrage and Bosk. Bosk is really strong if it sticks because we're playing all these events. All of a sudden, we get to No Good to Me Dead them, tap a unit, and deal 2 damage to something else, which could be very powerful, allowing us to deal 2 threats at the same time. If Bosk goes unanswered, he can single-handedly carry us through the game. And then we get to our late game engine of Gladiator Star Destroyer, 97th Legion, and Reinforcement Walker. The Star Destroyer has really solid stats because this is a space unit. It's online with Vet's Fire Spray, but it comes in and says, hey, this unit has Sentinel for the turn, which could be really important. You can give it to itself, which could help you stay alive, or negate all those tiny space units in the field. Or you could just give it to a ground unit and protect your life a little bit longer. We play these 2 big bodies so that we can close out games. Reinforcement Walker is a very strong card, and a card that I would say Palpatine decks should almost always run, even if they have the option of playing 3 Vaders, if you open all 3 Vaders, right? But Reinforcement Walker is very strong. Being able to draw or gain 3 life every turn is, pretty much the definition of a control card. It has 9 defense, so it's really hard to kill outside of, straight up removal effects and blue-black. And against those decks, we should already be thriving a lot because at one point they're going to spend their turn to summon something very big, and we're just going to steal it. And that's going to be a huge swing in our favor. So we don't have to worry about those control plays decks as much. And we're playing a lot more units, I would say, than the average control deck. That's because I really like units in general in games. They allow us to sometimes just beat and kill our opponent just by attacking them without even getting to our leader ability. Sometimes they're just so slow that we just play on curve and turn our dude sideways and win the game. Also lets us make more decisions about, do I want to trade with their unit or use one of my mini removal spells, right? No Good to Me Dead and Outmaneuver are very good later in the game. No Good to Be Dead should be saved probably for when they summon their leader. You just take out their leader for 2 whole turns. Maybe in the turn it finally comes back, you outmaneuver. And then the following turn, you go Emperor Palpatine, Reinforcement Walker, and you're like, wow, your leader's cute. Mine's a 4/10, and I have a 6/9. So, these stall cards, while they seem like, you're not getting much value from them, you're saving a lot of HP and allowing you to survive to the late game. Let's talk about some possible upgrades before we talk about this deck's matchup weaknesses and strengths. So, Emperor's Royal Guard is really good when you're playing Palpatine because it's just a 3/5 like Boba. Um, and if you're also able to get Boba, then you have 6 units in your deck that are 3/5s. The Royal Guard also gains Sentinel at some point in the game, so that's pretty cool. Um, if you play Royal Guard after the ULR, and then you have the official for that Sentinel. So I do I do really like Emperor's Royal Guard, and it's only a rare. So if you guys are able to get them, I would put them in your deck, and you would take out the Homestead Militias. But as you can see, they're both 3/4 ish. One's 3/5. So, and the Homestead Militia does have the option of gaining Sentinel. So it's not a huge loss if you don't have it, but it's just a little bit of a upgrade, as you can see, going in your deck. Boba Fett is also another great unit if you can get your hands on it. It's a 3/5. So the escort skiffs, I'd say, could come out for any of these little game units that you could find as well. So if you get a couple Boba Fetts, or maybe you got like 2 guards, 2 Boba Fetts, you could easily make that switch right there. The Strafing Gunship is another card you could consider. This deck right now plays a bunch of ground units, actually. You could gear towards more space if you want to. Kind of ignore the ground if you play and opened a lot of gunships. You would just focus on gunships and attack the ground in that way. And then again, you don't really need to play the escort skiffs in that regard. Or you could also take out some other ground units. You could take out the Homestead Militia completely if you want to focus on controlling the skies. Traitorous, Fett's Fire Spray, and Change of Heart are all these control-y type cards. The Fett's Fire Spray is something that you probably only want to add if you open a lot of Boba Fetts so that you can sometimes play it ready. So I would only play the Fire Spray if you also have a lot of Bobas in your deck. Otherwise, you can ignore that. The Traitors and Change of Heart, really good at taking a unit and then trading it into another unit. So you get a lot of value. Overwhelming Barrage in this deck's at 3, but I do think this could be a 2 of, and you could add Traitors or Change of Heart. I also think you could cut a Star Destroyer as well. Outmaneuver is another card that could probably go to 2 if you get some more of these control spells. And now at the top end, if you opened a Vader, it's a very expensive card, but if you open them, feel free to put them in. You would probably take out the 97th Legion, though I will say 97th Legion in games sometimes just beats your opponent. It gets so big. It being a 7/7 and then an 8/8, and then what if you ramp again? This thing can just go boom boom and your opponent's dead. So 97 Legion does feel really good, but Darth Vader is a very powerful card that summons 2 units. But if you look at the deck, it's not summoning like anything crazy, right? Like I'm getting maybe a 3/4 unit, maybe a shielded unit, a little bit sticky, but it's not like grabbing anything insane. It having ambush is the nicest part about Vader. So not having Vader in this deck is totally fine. I know, like, you see the card $70, you're like, man, I gotta save up for a Vader. Don't feel like that. Test this deck out, and you'll see the power of 97 Legion, and maybe you'll be like, hey, maybe I don't need this Vader after all. It's just overhyped. Excuse me. And I got Chimera in here. It's a big ship, and sometimes big ships just win us the game. So if you want to try out a Chimera because you opened it, it is a rare. You could probably take out 1 Reinforcement Walker. I would never go below 2 Reinforcement Walkers, by the way. I'd always play 2. This card is very strong. If you only play 2 in your deck as well, you should probably never resource it because you only have 2. So having that third one lets you resource it. But yeah, you could try out Chimera. It's just a big shielded spaceship. It does suck that almost all the big spaceships in this games are rares or legendaries. A lot of them are legendaries. So you do have to grab those somehow. So that's how I'd make the sideboard conversions in this deck. All right, let's talk about the deck's major weaknesses. So, the biggest weakness is Palpatine comes out at 8 resources, which is very slow. So leaders like Sabine and Boba can take advantage of that as they come out a lot quicker, and they will control the game pretty much while they are out. Sabine has a little bit worse stats, so sometimes we can just completely dodge that issue with like Cartel Spacer, can just tap it down for a few turns. then we can no good to me dead it. We are spending resources to deal with the leader, but at least it's not, inflicting that much damage on us. Where Boba can be like this huge swing though, and if they get to summon Boba and another 3 drop alongside with their regular turn of 5 resources, Boba can be pretty hard to deal with. It has 7 HP as well, so I would really, if you're playing against Boba, you really need to no good to me dead against them in order to make it to your Palpatine turn. So do keep that in mind. The deck, though, is not that susceptible to aggro, as there is a lot of restore in the deck with the Colonel and Consortium Star Viper, and we are playing a lot more units than normal. And the deck has it has shielded units, it has ambush on a few units. So we do have a lot of tools to keep us alive. And if you notice, our deck isn't playing that many late game cards, even though we're a late game deck. It's because I really only believe you need to like play one. Like if you play Reinforcement Walker and steal their guy, like that's pretty devastating when you're on the other side of the table. And that's usually all you need to do. And all of these little events are also pretty useful even later in the game, like waylaying their big thing back to their hand while I already control the board. Yeah, that's really strong. So like, don't underestimate waylay; it's very good. So even though this deck looks like it's playing a lot of cheap things, it has a lot of yellow cards in general are just like very resourceful in what they do throughout the game. This deck's major strengths is that it gets to pick on all the other control decks. It's very hard to deal with a 4-10 leader in general, especially one that just takes your best unit. Really check to see what they're playing in their deck and what color. You don't necessarily need to play Palpatine as soon as possible. You want to make sure you're taking something that they just played and spent their whole turn to play. If they play something like Avenger or Devastator, like wait and take that unit. Like that is very powerful, and they'll never come back from that. It's so powerful, in fact, if you don't summon their leader, you pretty much prevent them from playing these cards because they're just like, I'm in this terrible situation. And we also, because we play all these like little units, like we're able to summon them against Avenger, right? I can in the late game play a couple 2 drops and then play Palpatine, and then I don't have to worry about come to the dark side or getting my unit avengered. So we do have a really good plan into control, and I'd say we have the tools to beat aggro. So this deck is an all-around deck. I'd say we can get maybe bullied on the mid-range decks that play their leader a little bit earlier and have a similar late game to us. But when Palpatine comes out, man, he really does control the game. So do keep that in mind. And obviously we have all of these upgrade tools. So if you guys are able to, if you opened any of them, or slowly you can build your collection, you'll see how some of these cards can also help out the deck. But again, even without these cards that I have listed in the sideboard, this deck is solid. Like I'd feel fine going to a local, and I would not be surprised if I did like win a tournament with this deck. It is strong, so I do recommend trying it out, especially if you are on a budget. This is a very good deck on a budget. Practically free if you are able to find commons or uncommons from your friends. I know I have a bunch extra, so I'm sure people around do as well. And yeah, that concludes Budget Palpatine. I'm going to plan on making a budget deck for all of the leaders of the game. We started with Palpatine, and the next one will be on Cassian Andor. I haven't seen many Andor decks in general, and I have this spicy one that I've been bringing to my locals already, but I'm going to convert him into a budget version and play him a little bit and see how it goes, make some adjustments, and then I will be posting them on the channel just as I did with this deck. If you liked the video, please comment, like, and subscribe. Tell me what other leaders you want to see me do in the future. Tell me that my picks were wrong. Say, hey, you should try this card out. Maybe I overlooked something, but yeah, that's all I got, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and peace.